Jake Hungett, Calvary Lutheran High School in Jefferson City. Going to be talking about coaching techniques for different grade level of archers today. Kind of some of the things that we've done in the past that helped us. So we'll start in right away with fourth grade. One of the things that we've kind of implemented in our program is spend a 2-week minimum time frame in the class or in a classroom setting, talking about the rules, the safety rules, the 11 steps, kind of getting them up to speed on all of that. Well, we were shooting middle and elementary school together, so that was an opportunity to get them kind of get that part taken care of while the middle school kids that had already had experience get them started on the range. So it takes at least 4 practice sessions in there. They do have to pass a little 11 steps quiz and kind of earn their time on the range, you might say. But we do use name tags. We've always tried to make it a point to get to know names as soon as possible. When I left Trinity Lutheran School in Jeff City, we were about 75 kids, which could be a challenge to know all of their names. But we did get it done. As kind of brings it to a personal level. We assign seats strictly to keep the distractions down. Things like closing it to parents and that kind of thing, and keeping them in a place where they need to be in their hands of themselves. Try to make the practice more effective and efficient. And sometimes, depending on the size of your group, that takes a volunteer or two to help with that. Whether or not they know anything about what you're doing, just somebody to kind of monitor and keep them under control seemed to help us. We also kind of lay down the ground rules for what's acceptable and unacceptable, and low tolerance on that too, so that we can kind of get them. We want them to have fun, but they have to understand too what our expectations are as far as their behavior goes. So, but they, like I said, they had to earn their range time. They've got to pass the little quiz, and they figure out pretty quick if they're not paying attention, they miss out on stuff. So it seemed to be a good move for us. When you get to the range, when you move into the range, I believe it's also a good time to have extra volunteers if they're available. Most of you'll find that you've got people with knowledge of archery, mechanics, or whatever it may be, and some, maybe some people willing to help out that don't necessarily have that experience, but there's still a use for them. We had a group large enough that we would maybe half of them shooting and half of them were at the waiting line, or extra large group at the waiting line, and some of them would finish sooner. In that area, when they're back at the waiting line, we would implement some volunteers to try to just keep them calm from being a distraction to the ones who are still up at the line, that kind of thing. So if you have those resources, they're definitely useful. One thing we always want to make sure we did was take a few minutes before practice and just talk, communicate, make sure we're not sending different messages to archers, and try to keep from confusing them. So there are obviously some basics that they've got to learn, and then the more range time that you get, you try to start molding some of these specifically to an archer, and the last thing you want to do once you get them heading in the right direction is to confuse them. So try to keep the communication lines open. We had 7 coaches working the middle and elementary schools, and so there was going to be times when we knew that, hey, you're going to be working with this group, or you're going to be working with this group. We want to make sure we're keeping things consistent as far as what we're telling them. So of course, again, zero tolerance on the behavior. We started with blank targets and aim points. That's obviously we're using gap aiming as our method of aiming, and just try to stress the importance of shooting a group. The way you get that is your consistency in your form. A lot of them want to rush right into the bullseye target. I feel like aim point, aim at that spot every time, develop the group. We figure out what our gap is. Seems to be pretty effective. Now we will get through a few practices like that, or the better part of a practice, maybe towards the end you might turn it around, let them shoot at a bullseye. But we try to keep from getting into the groove, just nothing but bullseye targets all the time. So we will walk them through the 11 steps verbally, not let anybody get ahead to the next step before it's time, and if they do, we'll start over. But just to try to stress the importance of each step. I remember my first year, I'll admit I didn't give the 11 steps enough credit. And as the further we got into it, the more I realized there's a reason they're there, and there's a reason that number 1 is stance. So I think very valuable. to make sure they know those steps and walk them through them, and not let them get ahead of themselves, because you'll see some kids that are skipping steps. You know, pre-draw is the one that gets skipped, it seems like a lot. Anchor can get skipped a lot. So, and of course, when you're using your aim points, we talk to them about, some will get confused and think that you want them to hit the point, the mark. We use those little roofing or tab nails that got the plastic tab on them. And I'll tell them to put the arrow right at the bottom of that tab. Let the tab sit on top of the arrow so they know exactly where they're at every time. You may hit it or you may not. I want you to aim at that spot every time and see if we can't get a group out of it. And eventually they kind of figure out, I'm just aiming at that spot, and then we will physically measure the distance for them on the gap and help them develop their point on the target when that's time. But increase the process. That's really with any grade, but that's the important part of it. Oftentimes I'll say you got to take care of what happens back here. What happens down there to take care of itself. So kind of like the earning the range time, same thing with the bullseye target. We'd like to see some groups start to form. Then we'll let them shoot the bullseye target as long as they're practicing consistency and starting to develop those groups. We also will bring in high school archers on occasion to show them, this is what I'm talking about when I say this, or this, when we talk about your anchor, when we talk about the follow through, and just let them demonstrate while we talk it and bring the group in close where they can kind of see that archer following those steps. So kind of puts it in front of them visually as they hear it. So helps with that. I guess we'll move to 5th grade archers. So if they're new coming into 5th grade, if they hadn't shot in 4th grade, we will ask or make them do the orientation class as well. They might advance through a little bit quicker depending on the kid, but it seems to, that's just a requirement. There's no exceptions. We talked with the group that had shot previously about their expectations for the year. A lot of them will, since they've completed their season, they'll have a score on the website that says they did this. Well, I'd like to try to help them understand what happens when you don't shoot for several months, if they're some take the summer off or whatever, and that you should never expect anything out of what you do. You've got to work to earn it, to keep it, to improve on it. Expectations usually lead in disappointment. So we talk about focus and the importance of a good practice, quality practice. Practice hard so tournaments are easy. Especially with younger kids, you get through school and some of them, the ones that still have lots of energy, they almost do it. They can possibly do it like a recess, which not only does that take the practice down for them, but the others around them as well. So we try to kind of discuss that, keep the focus, work on the fundamentals. If you have a facility that allows for it, we've really found a lot of success in breaking kids apart. Say you've got 3 or 4 kids that are having a timing issue or a release issue or a bow hand that's dropping or whatever. We'll try to kind of group them, take them into another room, which we have a cafeteria right there close to our gymnasium, so we can go in there with a small group of them, break off a coach that we know that they'll react well to, and work on that for that practice. So I know that that requires more equipment, nets and whatnot, but it seems to be really effective working in the small groups. So one thing we did was make a training bow, and there's products out there for manufacturers that are similar, but I basically took a Genesis and took the wheel and cam and strings off and cable, and I put a piece of elastic between the 2 axles. And that way they can actually draw a bow back and feel an anchor with a bow in their hand. Same concept as a string bow, which is very important, very effective as well. But this can actually release too. You don't take it all the way through the release and the follow through. So that's been a pretty helpful tool for us. You can actually get around in front of the archer and see what their anchor looks like, what their hook looks like, if it's in a good place or if they're starting to torque it a little bit. That's been very, very good tool for us. And at this point in 5th grade, we really try to kind of watch, we already are watching the mechanics and the form that they're developing to make sure it's easier to change in the beginning than it is later. So if we've got, some kids start out with their bow hand, I always start with stop sign, fold the fingers down. But you get some that are starting to come around like this, and of course their elbows are down towards the floor, so we try to kind of nip that in the bud early and work on pushing that to the right position. There's some fine tuning from there that everybody has their own, but that's the general, idea behind that, and other parts of the process too. But basically try to catch it early and keep them heading in the right direction, so you don't have to try to break a bad habit later, because that can be difficult to do. And of course, with younger kids, you want them to want to come back. That's a big thing. And it requires, you got to have fun. So we implement some different games. Every so many practices we'll have a fun night, and if the game's right, you're actually still working on your skill. You're still fine-tuning your skill. But we'll put 3D targets on a cart, drag it across the range, a moving target. And I've said before, it's amazing how many kids can stick a 10 on a moving animal, but have trouble grouping arrows in a stationary bullseye target. But they can do it. We actually had a little crow that we hung from the basketball goal that was about that big around, and just would swing it, and that thing would be full of arrows by the time we're done. So, but those are good things to do. The kids really enjoy it. 3D targets, if you've got them, and really any kind of target. That's we've got a couple of goblins and javelina and whatnot, so it doesn't necessarily have to be the nasty 3D targets that we're shooting at. I think it's all a basic, it's all relative. Aim points here, marks here, follow the process. So it kind of mixes it up a little bit, makes it fun to keep them interested and wanting to come back next time. Okay. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade archers. So one thing I'll say, the last one, I'll wait until the very end for questions. Some of these might develop as we talk about each grade, so I'm not opposed to hitting some of those as we go if you guys have any. So these are kind of grouped together. Middle school kids, everybody, kids in general all progress at a different rate, but I feel like 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, they've had their elementary career. Some of them probably hit some good numbers, whatever the case may be, but I always start them out with the score of the first round of the season, just to kind of let them know where they're at. And it will, typically I think you're going to see a number that wasn't as good as maybe not their personal best, and that is strictly just to help them understand that if you haven't shot for 3 or 4 months, or if you're not shooting as much as you were during the season, you shouldn't expect the score to be your personal best. And like I said before, expectations usually lead to disappointment. So this is the reality of things. This is where we're at. Now we work and practice to get back to what our goals are, or where we want to be, or where we were. So the other thing I think it's important to do is check eye dominance and just vision in general. We're not doing eye checks or vision checks, but we have had some experiences where I've had 3 kids where their eye dominance has changed. That's really more towards the 8th grade year. But I also had a girl that her vision was worsening in that year. She was getting to the point where her aim point was fuzzy. She couldn't see it. So there was a little bit of, I'm not going to call it target panic, I'm not an expert on that by any means, but there was a little bit of panic or anxiety about being at that aim point and letting go of the arrow before she was really completely anchored. And so we figured out later, after she went to the eye doctor and got a set of glasses and came to practice, she could see really well and was able to anchor and stay on her aim point. So it's good to kind of keep an eye on that. If you're experiencing any of those troubles, it might be something to kind of look into. So again, blank targets and aim points, I think it's there's a lot of times what we found was there was too much focus on just 10s and on the bullseye target. And the blank target with the aim point is a surefire way to know. When I aim at this point every time with nothing, no distraction of rings, an animal, anything like that that's going to dictate score, we're not able to score that arrow. I can just concentrate on that aim point. We can get a true feel for what the gap is and develop consistency through that. As you can, obviously see the arrow, the group of arrows. Any kind of developing or lingering mechanical issues, kids will, it's amazing how many kids will find comfort in doing some, they have a mechanical flaw, they'll just keep shooting it even though the results aren't there, versus making a change or correcting the problem. Too many of them are worried about, that's going to mess up it's going to mess me up for the rest of the season. I don't agree with that. I think it's something that, if you spend a week or 2 weeks correcting the problem the right way, then you can come out of it and actually probably exceed where you would have otherwise. So, I guess to summarize, don't be afraid to make an adjustment, even when they're, shooting okay or shooting well. If you see something that needs to be changed and it's going to affect the long term, then I say definitely address it. So, we've also been known to take several practice rounds or several ends of practice at the net, just to work on form. Let the arrows fall to the ground. Maybe move to the blanks with aim points, but either way, kind of let, say, the bullseye face until the end of the week before a tournament. They tend to, if they got some arrow flight that's not where they want it, or some arrows hitting outside the mark, then they might have a tendency to chase their aim point, move their aim point, instead of knowing that, hey, this is not an aim point issue. A lot of them associate a missed mark with aim point issues almost immediately, it seems like. So that's a way to kind of help combat that a little bit. Lose the glove. We are not fans of gloves, shooting gloves, just strictly because you can't get a good feel on the string. I think it's important to know exactly where your fingers are placed on that string, and you feel it all the way through the shot. So we try to. A lot of the younger kids seem like they start with those, and so we've got a little glove wall that we put them on, and once they're retired. So tune the bow and set it where it's comfortable. So when the kids are younger, and I'm sure most of you experience this, where especially the smaller kids with the short draw, they've got to aim so high, especially at 15 meters, to get that arrow on the target. And so the tendency is to turn the bow down, develop the muscles as they develop, turn the bow down where you get a little bit flatter flying arrow. But once they get to that point, especially middle school kids, I've got a lot of kids that they just want to shoot their bow on zero, especially boys. That's just where they wanted it. And I believe that doesn't have to be the case. An arrow in the target will give you the indication of whether your bow's set right. If you've got good arrow flight, good placement. And so you want it to be comfortable. I don't want to see a kid that's got to turn down to zero and he's back here shaking after a few seconds. They need to be able to hold it comfortably. And so that's a big one with those guys, that age kids. Slow-mo video. Looking at it with the archers, and most of you probably use this. I know there's several apps out there. I just use a slow-mo on my camera, but it'll help you pick up, a lot of things like creeping forward or throwing the fingers or something like that, and you can show them that. They'll tell a kid that they're creeping forward. It's hard to determine, to realize that for some of them. So you can show them their hand movement on the face, or the end of the arrow, where this is coming out of the, out the end of the bow. You can see that it's extending. So slow-mo video is always, I'm sure most of you are prior to using it or whatever, but it's a pretty valuable tool. You can actually scroll back and forth in the video and show them what you're seeing. So create plenty of practice opportunities. So we had a bigger group in the middle and elementary school. The high school team that I coach now is not nearly as big. It's 27 or 28 kids. But it's always a struggle to get gym time. It seems like we take a back seat to anybody else that wants to use it, feels like. So we have had to get creative with our practices. I have a place that I rent on this, a private location I've set nets up there and targets. It might be practicing with another local school if you're able to, but you've got to create practice opportunities to see improve. And I don't know if there's anything that you don't get better at with more practice. Bigger groups, what we were finding is practices were less efficient just because of the numbers. So we broke it down, more opportunities. 3 or 4 nights a week, 4 hours a night is what we were seeing there when I left the middle school. So that's just what we had to do to be able to get everybody a good quality practice. So, and then again, same way with these as the kids before, games that are something to make it fun, but still requires them to work on their form and concentrate. Tic-Tac-Toe is a good one. I built a shooting tree. Maybe you've seen it from pistol. If anybody's a pistol shooter, climb a tree, got them going up each side, hit that one, hit the next one, hit the next one to the top. So I built one for the archers. That's a fun one. Take a piece of PVC and cut rings and hang it from a string out in front of the target. Shoot through that ring. or a O-ring, something like that, just to, I remember I brought some rubber washers in, and the diameter, the hole was probably barely bigger than the shaft of the arrow. And all like, oh, never do that. And I had 2 or 3 kids sink one right through the center. They just, once they give it a try, so it's kind of a challenge. I always, it reminds me of going to the fair and paying $5 for 5 balls to throw and knock over a bowling pin with a ball. You don't worry about that ball that you just threw. You just pick up another one, just keep throwing, keep working at it, trying to get closer. And so it kind of takes the focus off of that last arrow shot. Wasn't a good one kind of thing. So we also do things like try to shoot an arrow in each number. We'll have little contests at practice, or shoot 5 5s or 5 4, 5 of the same number, and instead of just focusing on 50s, because that just seems to, it takes away from the focus on what we're trying to do here, which is develop a form that's consistent, and worry about that part of it instead of what we're seeing down there. So it also shows them that they have more control than what they think over that whole process, over the arrow. So I like that a lot too. I guess moving on to high school archers, same idea as starting out the year with scoring the first round. You'll get somebody into the year in the 290s and not shoot for 3 or 4 months, and they'll roll in and think, I've got it figured out. Well, I always say you never have it figured out. You need to constantly be working at it and know that a little flaw can come up at any time. But it also gives them an understanding of where they're at and what they need to do, or what kind of grade they need to get back into to get to where they want to be. So we had several kids. Last year was my first year in high school, and I had a few kids come in that had some grip. Their bow hand was in the wrong position. By this time, they're becoming young adults. Some are a lot less receptive to suggestions than others, but I think it's if you could show them get them to try it, get them to buy into what you're talking about, connect with them, say, hey, give this a try. We can always go back to the way we're shooting. If this isn't working for us, and there's no guarantee that what you tell them that first time is going to work. It's a little bit different for everybody, but if you see an obvious problem, I've got a lot of kids had a lot of kids that were, they'd have the string. I believe that the string should touch the nose, and it's not, it's got to be that way, but I feel like when you don't, it brings the back end of the arrow away from, brings it out this way as a right-handed shooter, you're going to have arrows to the left, so you have to aim, your aim point is off to the right. I like to aim right below the center. And so I had several that really, that's an easy fix. Just bring the string over to touch your nose. And you might have to change your anchor a little bit. But if they can see it work and try it, buy into it, then it may work for them. And as they get older and scores start climbing, points are harder to come by. Once you get up over 280, 285, 90, those points the jumps are less frequent. And so you may find that if you try something new, you're able to gain a few points. And every point matters, just like every arrow can. It's the same concept. So definitely a firm believer in that. Once you identify those, either a flaw or something that you're changing, and they buy into it and they're giving it a try, then give them a little bit of room. And just, in a big practice, on occasion, we might have everybody shooting. Generally speaking, we usually have about half the group at a time. And so then once we kind of go over something, I'll move down the line and just, we're a pretty small staff. We have 2 coaches working it all the time. We're going to have more next year, right, Gary? But so there was others to cover too, and that gives them a little bit of room to try to really understand what you're trying to help them with. And it's not so much that I'm telling you to do this, you do this. I want you to feel it, you work with it, we'll talk, and we're working on it together, basically. So anytime you can gain points, though, that's definitely an advantage. So moving to aim point. So realize once you come back, once you draw the bow and anchor, your arrow's not right at your aim point. But I've seen several kids that want to start and follow their arrow until they get to their aim point. And I try to stop that following, I know that you have to move to get there, but I usually compare it to, hey, if I ask you to look at a point on the wall, I'm going to look at that exit sign, and I want you to point at it. Well, I did not follow my finger to that aim point. I looked at it and I pointed at it. The arrow is basically an extension of your arm. And so I feel like, and the reason I say that is, I feel like if, let's say their endpoint's between the 8 and 9, so red, yellow, at the bottom, if they're coming up with their arrow, then they start to see red, they know they're getting close to that aim point. And I think I know what we'll see is a tendency to either release early or get to the aim point, forget to pause, go right past it, but go ahead and let the arrow go anyway, and you've got a high arrow. That sometimes will lead to chasing your aim point. Oh, I'm too high, I need to lower my aim point down. Well, then when you shoot the arrow the right way, you're too low. So I try to get them away from that, following the arrow to the aim point. I believe in focusing on the aim point, letting the arrow come below it, and it'll be a little bit blurry. You know, your focus is more towards the aim point, then the arrow should be a little bit blurry and it's hovering underneath that. So that's a big one, though. And that's a hard. Ones that have developed that problem and are doing it, it's a hard one to break. But, you know, I'm sure all you know what happens if you shoot on the go. The arrow's going to move too. So, you know, I talked to them about you can't move at the same rate of speed every single time. You cannot assure yourself that you're letting go at the same, and that arrow's at the same spot every time. So that's a big one. We've kind of tried to take care of. So again, blank targets with aim points. First practice of the week for sure is blanks and shooting groups. If you've got some that are consistently shooting groups, not working on any problems, then we keep paper faces on the backside of the target. We can flip it around, let them shoot that. But I really feel like anybody that's dealing with any kind of mechanical issue, looking at a bullseye target to fix it is the wrong. I just don't agree with that. I think it needs to be a blank or a net or something to take your mind off of that arrow did not hit a 10. So big believer in that. And then, of course, the last practice that we shoot bullseye targets, just make sure our aim points are, or the bullseye face, make sure our aim points were, you know, we've got those down. A high school kid's got so much to worry about nowadays, it's easy for them to forget where their aim point is, you know. So one thing we started doing this year, we keep all of our target faces from our tournaments. They've been shot one time, or you know, maybe 2 archers on the target. I'll take them and I'll fold them, basically fold the 2 sides in, so you've got a target face that will cover half of the target butt. And set it on the target, and so you've got half, if you're looking at the target, you've got half of it blank, half of it with target face. And we'll put an aim point on both, maybe just an aim point on the blank, and we'll work back and forth just to make sure, you know, we know that there's too many kids that associate an arrow that misses the mark with an aim point problem. I need to work on my aim point. I need to work on my aim point. You need to work on your form, make your form work for the aim point, because generally speaking, most of them have reached physically the size that they're going to be or close to it. And that aim point, unless they have a major change in their mechanics, shouldn't be changing all that much. So this is a way to show them, you know, an archer tells me, hey, it's down here. And I said, well, when we shoot the blank and we measure the gap, it's 10 inches, but you're telling me it's down here, it's 14 inches difference. How do you make that, how does that equate? And so having the bullseye face on the target next to a blank, we can go back and forth. I might tell them, hey, shoot 2 arrows here, 2 arrows here, 1 here, 1 there, 5 here, 5 there. No set number. Just work it back and forth to show yourself that that is my aim point. I need to stick with it. I'm shooting the groups. So it seems to be a pretty effective way to kind of check that. So the next one is, after I put this on there, I thought I have to be careful about how I talk about this shooting with your eyes closed. So, but it is a pretty good way to fix a mechanical problem if you've got a bow arm that's jerking or dropping out of it, or flicking your release, or rolling out your release. And when we do that, we'll come to anchor and aim, so we know that and we'll have a coach standing behind them when they're doing it. We know that the arrow is pointed in the right position, it's going to hit the net. And I'll ask them to release the arrow with their eyes closed. Don't open them until you hear the arrow hit the net and fall to the floor. And there's something about looking at that versus having your eyes closed that it's amazing how you'll have a kid that's doing this, and you'll shoot with their eyes closed for a few rounds, and all of a sudden this starts to go away. Now, it takes more than just that to break that habit, but I've believe that that's helped us anyway quite a bit in the past. So as the kids that have done it to overcome a mechanical issue, what we'll see is when it starts to come back, recurs, I'll catch them working that process again to try to eliminate that little flaw. So it's good to see they recognize that there's value in it, it helps, and they're taking it upon themselves to do that. So that's high school age. We don't get into a lot of that with the younger kids unless we're working in really small groups, I suppose. So I remember the first time I said that, they just said, "What?" But anyway, it takes close supervision, but it is possible. So the slow motion video, again, pretty valuable tool just to show them what's happening when the release or when the shot goes off. You can actually scroll it back and forth and move that video wherever you want to show them, hey, you're creeping forward, or whatever the case may be. Because there's a lot of those things, there's a lot of those little things that happen that they don't even realize you can. And it's not just them, it's anybody. But you can see, if you can see it, show them that, and it's something they can work on. They have to understand that nobody's immune to any problems. It can happen to anybody. And as a coach, it's not necessarily my job to tell you that you have the perfect form. It's just my job to tell you when I see something that's inconsistent with what we've been seeing. And so recognize it, accept it, develop a plan to fix it, and then work on that. And when you come to practice, practice for an hour, I want you to feel like when you left there that, hey, this is what I worked, this is what I'm coming in to work on, this is what I worked on when I leave here, I feel pretty good about what I did. May not have fixed it, but if you're working in the right direction, that's where the direction you want to go. So, but make a conscious effort to fix the problem, accept it, know that it's there, talk about it, don't be embarrassed about it. There are a lot of kids that don't like to talk about that. Anybody got quick shooters? When they just get the ink and boom, and I don't understand. I don't get how they don't understand that the movement that's going on when you're drawing. And girls can be really good about drawing, super steady, and staying on that aim point. But the fact is, there's always going to be a little movement. Nobody's perfectly still. But you've got to get back and let things settle, in my opinion, before that shot goes off. And so a lot of them don't like to talk about that, though. And I'm one that talks about it to the whole group. I may not say a name, but I'll say something I've been thinking about. Who's got this that they're dealing with, and that, to kind of get the wheels turning a little bit. Know what the problem is and work towards a fix. So next one's don't rush, which kind of leads right into that. We usually start them with a shot sequence, a count, a cadence, words, whatever it is that works for them. To know that I feel like timing needs to be as consistent as everything else in the process. And so when an engine runs, it runs consistently the same. If you're saying a sequence in your mind and your process is not caught up or not in time with the sequence, I tell them to let down, start over, don't let the arrow go. Something's out of whack. So I think that's pretty important to start on and continue with it. They may need to change it because after a few years it may get a little bit boring at just 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, I'm not saying that that's what it has to be. You tell me what works for you, and then we'll develop the work for your shot. So the ones that you're having trouble with, don't want maybe not convinced what you're telling them is going to fix the problem. I'll just get up there and I'll say, okay, I'm going to let you shoot 5 arrows your way, and then we're going to shoot 5 arrows my way. I'm going to walk you through the process. And this is really, timing is a big one for this. Fast arrows usually lead to higher arrows in my experience. And so I'll verbally say the commands for them. I'll do a count before I'm ready for them to release and see what we get for results. And it might take a few rounds to develop that right timing, but I think generally what you'll see is more consistency. And that's really for kids that are not using a shot sequence. So, and I'm sure everybody knows about visualization. It works. It really does. I'll tell them all, remember when you were little and you just think about, I'm batter up, bottom of the ninth, 2 on, 2 out, tie score, I'm going to hit it out of here. Visualize the perfect shot. Practice it in practice. It's valuable. It works. I believe that 100%. So, and don't cash out early. That's a big one. So, I'll tell my kids all the time, at some point you're going to realize you may realize that today's not going to be your personal best, but that is no reason to cash out on your team. You've got to give this team every point that you can. You owe that to them. We preach the team concept and score. We know we're competing individually as well. We have, there's 24 kids on that team. I know it takes 12 scorers to put a number on the board, but it takes 24 kids, or however many kids are on that roster that day. That's the team. And so don't let your teammates down by cashing out early. That's a big one in my opinion. And again, practice opportunities. As high school rolls around, I've found that now we got jobs to compete with, in addition to all the other activities that they do. I've got to work at this time, and so we've, like I said, I've got a private range that I'll make available to them, and I have a sign up that I've got X amount of spots available every week. You sign up, make sure you get to this many of them. If you want to be at more, you can. But it requires more on our part, the coach's part, as far as availability, being there. If, like I said before, if you want to see an improvement, it takes practice. So, and some kids have that, something that they're working on. It may not be the right environment at the time. You need a different atmosphere or opportunity for them to shoot. That's the way to do it. I think it's important that you do that, create plenty of opportunities for them. And that requires more out of your, the facility that you're at. It might require some more equipment. So anyway, we've been fortunate to be able to do that. So we talked about goal setting, and we talked about that as the year goes on. I think it's important. One thing I asked is they not base it on score. Don't make 290 your goal. I just don't. At the end of the day, we're dealing with numbers, and we need to know where we're at. We score first practice of the year. We'll score at other practices here and there. I'm not discounting the importance of a score, but I don't like to see a number as the goal. I just think it's, hey, my goal today is to shoot the 40 arrows, not 30 arrows, 40 arrows at my pace, not, fast pace. And so, if the goal doesn't, let's say that's your goal, 40 arrows, the right pace. If 38 of them are at the right pace, or 36 of them, or 30 of them, then focus on that. Nice. Next week our goal is to, improve that number. I'm not going to focus on the bad. It doesn't do any good to do that. It's kind of like the shot arrow that you can't change. But focus on the good. Make sure I've always believed that hard work, working at it will, with the right attitude, will gain some. You'll see some success because of that. And not only do you tell them that, get them to bind it, but I think that they need to see that you believe that when you tell them that. And I do. We've worked a lot of hours with kids that have troubles, and I'll never give up on them. And I won't let them give up either. I think there's a lot of value, life lesson type stuff, in knowing that you can work through something. It's not going to fix itself. It's up to you. It's up to us to fix it, and you're a part of that. So that's pretty critical, I think. Moving on, I just kind of have the summary page for all ages. One thing we started doing, it took me a year to realize this, but shooting the bow myself has really given me a perspective on the whole process, and an appreciation for the ones that are doing some amazing numbers with it. I've taught myself, shoot left-handed and right-handed. I'm primarily a right-handed shooter, but I shoot left-handed just so that I'm talking to a left-handed shooter about things. I can, get myself in that position, show them this, and they can relate to it. But I think there's a lot of value in shooting the bow. Not necessarily, I know there's some coaches, or at least that I know, that are hesitant to do so in front of their archers. And, I said, hey, just blame it on your eyes. When you get older, you can't see as well, so just blame it on that. But we do a lot of stuff with, like we'll have shoot-offs with coaches, between coaches and kids, or they'll challenge us, or we'll bring the parents in, that kind of thing. So it's just a good activity to have, and I enjoy it myself. I realized in 7th grade when my son started out shooting me that, I just got to come to terms with the fact that I'm not going to be I'll never have the opportunity to be on the podium anyway, but I think there's value in knowing what the process is like. So, and preach the process. Make sure they understand, and I'll say as much at the beginning or at the end of the season as I do at the beginning of the season. It all matters what happens, what you do right back here. That takes care of what happens down there. So, understand the value in the process. Let the arrows take care of themselves. Concentrate on doing things the right way. Again, goal setting with no numbers. and make sure they all realize that nobody's too good for fundamental work. I think that's where a lot of them will start to fall off, is when they forget those type of drills or whatever it is that they were doing to get up to build themselves up to that point, and the amount of work it took to get there. You know, you'll see some kids that will come in and just go at it hard for a couple months to build themselves up, and then their practice routine changes after a couple months once they hit. That's why I don't like numbers for goals. Like, oh, I hit this number, okay, I'm done. No, the ultimate goal is, you know, we all know what that is. So don't use a number as your goal, and don't change your the way you practice, which is fundamentals. It's super important. Try to keep it fun. You know, as kids get into high school, we'll do different. You know, still do some games, but different, or competitions. They really seem to like that. Last man standing, shoot-offs, mix it up. You know, 2 of them on a team versus these 2, whatever the case is. Just something to kind of keep it fun, to still work on things. Understand that the problems don't fix themselves and nobody's immune to them. Even the best round, I mean, I can remember seeing a kid shoot a 290, and when she came back telling her, hey, that was awesome. I want you to realize what's happening, though. I'm not one to really run away from the problems. I think we have to recognize them so that we can nip them in the bud and don't let them turn into bigger ones. So, practice your shoot-offs. They're going to happen. When you start to see higher numbers, it's very, very possible. A shoot-off in practice is not the same as a tournament. It's about as close as you can get. So I believe in that. And I also believe in the 3D targets. I think that the 3D, some experience with 3D will improve your skills, make you a better bullseye archer. And it's nice to have more than one round to shoot when you drive all the way to Myrtle Beach from Jefferson City, Missouri. Let's shoot a couple times instead of once. So anyway, that's another one too that I'm believing in. That I think one of the big things is being able to connect with your archers, knowing they need to understand and they need to believe you when you tell them you believe in them. And, you invest a lot of time in them. At one point, I feel like I've got 30 kids or however many we've got on the team. And when you work together on something to work together to fix a problem or whatever it is, and you accomplish or see some success, it's a really gratifying feeling to both of you. And I think developing that trust and knowing that you're there for them, you're in their corner, is pretty important. So anyway, I'm a little early, I guess. I don't know. 5 minutes. Who's got questions? Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
You talked about having fun nights. Can you just describe what a timeline looks like, how many kids you have, what kind of games you play?
Yeah. So we'll the moving 3D targets, they love those. So we're lucky that our gym has the cafeteria on one side and the hallway on the other, so we can have a rope between the two, and somebody not on the range, they're beyond the limits of the range, taking the animal back and forth. They love that. We'll have the 3D animals out, and we'll put little pins on them. You can get that. You want a piece of candy kind of thing. But if we say it's fun night, we make sure that they know so that nobody misses it. And then it's just an hour of organized chaos is what it is. And so it's just, it's a lot of picking up arrows off the floor, but it's like a little reliever from the practice regimen, I guess. And so we'll do that. Sometimes we'll be a little more structured in that, hey, if you want to shoot Tic-Tac-Toe, you'll be on this plane, and we've already got a target there with, I've got a wide format printer, so I can print out the grid, and it's already there. We'll have a bunch of those sitting there. If you want to play 21, we'll have that target here, whatever the case is. So there's really, I don't know if there's any games that haven't gone over very well. Look, there for a while we were blowing up balloons and putting them on the targets. Stack 3 up one side, 3 up the other, and put 2 kids there who can pop 3 balloons with the least amount of arrows or whatever. That we got tired of blowing up balloons though. So, but any of those type of things, they really enjoy. There's also target faces that have different games on them. The thing is you just don't want to get too entailed with the game where it takes longer than, if you've got a whole line of kids shooting, you want it to go relative 2 minutes, say, or plus or minus, so that you don't have a bunch of kids standing back here. Game night, everybody's kind of hyped up anyway. You got them standing back here while their son's still playing their game, and you can run a little trouble there. But I actually took a Reinhardt, one of the round Reinhardt targets, with the replacement center, and I flipped around the black side and I painted a dartboard on it. So just a black and white dartboard with the numbers on it, and the high school kids enjoyed that. Once they shot it, really liked it. So, it's anything you can think of. A shooting tree was a good one. I threatened to make a dunk booth that when you hit the button, the dunk booth's over here, obviously, but it goes off, and I want to figure out that one too. So, that's for a little bit. Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain the shooting tree? I don't understand.
Okay, so yeah, pistol shooters know it better. It's basically a stand that's got dots going up each side, and when you hit a dot, it swings around. You shoot it out of the way, if that makes sense. But most of those, any of them that you find that you buy are made out of steel. They shoot them with a pistol. So I actually made one. I had a stand, made one out of PVC and all thread with a rubber bumper on the end of it. So when they hit it, it slings around. And so there's 5 of them up each side. You got 2 people shooting. Can I go to 5 before you can with 5 arrows? And in general, you need to give more than 5 arrows, and it's going to take more than that. But and I just went to Lowe's and bought some rubber stoppers that were probably 2-inch diameter, somewhere in that range. And I just drilled a hole in them and put them around the end of the all thread, and it works really well. So.
I think they make I think it's called Sacco.
Is that right?
Yeah.
For archery?
Sacco, S-A-C-O.
Yeah, I was never able to find one, and I just always, something about it. Well, I'll tell you where it came from, is blowing up balloons and putting them up the side. They really liked it. I get tired of blowing up balloons all the time and picking up all the fragments from shot balloons, so I just kind of dove into that thing and made it. Yes, sir?
I thought about the tree that you're talking about. I was going to ask for a picture of it, but then I got to thinking, how do you keep the kids slowed down during the process if they're racing to the sidelines?
They'll never. I've only put the tree in front of high school kids, but after a couple of misses, they realize they got to slow down and concentrate. Absolutely. And we still coach through the fun nights. We still talk about, hey, I'll say no matter what you're shooting at, the process is still the same. You still have, you can't just get up there and just, you still have to do this, and that kind of keeps them in that mode. But like I said, I've not put it out in front of younger kids yet, but you don't have your mark to aim at. I like to start them at the bottom instead of starting at the top and using the bottom one to aim at, to try to keep aiming. But they're going to do whatever. But they figure out pretty quick. You'll see a kid get up there and shoot 5 with 5 arrows, and the next time shoot 20 arrows and never touch one. It's a pretty fine line. So, anybody else? Okay. Thanks, everybody. I can send you a picture of that tree if you want. Okay. Yeah, I'll do that. I should have had it. I'm not very good at these kind of things here. I should have had pictures of it.
If you guys have any other questions